Cradled in the hilly countryside of Upper Austria, south of Linz, near Enns, we find the idyllic little town of St Florian. Conscious of its traditions and in harmony with nature, St Florian welcomes the visitor and invites him to stay. Today, as in the past, the marketplace is the centre of town life. On the main square we find the house where the sculptor Leonhard Sattler lived. In another house lived the famous Anton Bruckner. Built on a hill, there stands above the town the convent of St Florian, dominating the surrounding countryside with its massive shape. This was without doubt the cultural centre of the town and surroundings. Coming up to the monastery, we note the different architectural styles. Great architects like Carlone and Brandhauer built and enlarged over generations. Even today you can feel the presence of these masters, who dedicated their lives to completing this monument. The knowledge and creations of many famous men is built into the walls of this extraordinary monastery and gives us an impression even today of the beauty and uniqueness of their times. The monastery, built over the tomb of St Florian, was mentioned in documents for the first time in the early 9th century. Complete documentation exists from the year 1071, when with Bishop Altmann, the severe rule of the monks of St Augustine entered into St Florian. The Augustinian monks initiated a cultural revival. Knowledge and teaching became increasingly important. The convent ran a famous school of writing, from which manuscripts and other works still exist. These can be seen today in the monastery library, among the finest in the world. 135,000 volumes in 9 adjacent halls have survived the centuries. Collecting was without doubt a great passion for the Augustinian monks of St Florian. They thus created, apart from the great library, an arsenal, a collection of coins, the corridor called Of Antiquity, and a gallery of paintings. The painting gallery is the main part, with works by masters like Caravaggio, Bruegel, Altomonte and Feistenberger. At its centre, however, there is the Altdorfer collection, which is open to the public. This artist created, apart from the celebrated Battle of Alexander, also the famous altar of St Sebastian at the beginning of the 16th century. 16 tables have been preserved. They show dramatically and with vivid colours the life and passion of Christ. A new kind of lively folk religiousness found expression here. On the outside, with the altar closed, is the legend of St Sebastian. Together with a cultural life, also ecclesiastical life developed. Very pious women called enclosed women had themselves locked up in special cells in the monastery. Some even had themselves immured. The most famous case was the young Wilbirk. They saw this severe penitence as the path to mystical union with Christ. During the 30 Years' War, also the convent underwent considerable damage. With the laying of the first foundation stone of the new convent church, in 1686 began St Florian's long period of reconstruction and transformation. This immense task was entrusted to the Italian Carlo Antonio Carlone. After finishing the church of the convent, he rapidly started the planning of the west face of the building. But he did not manage to complete his work. It was his successor, the famous Jakob Brandhauer, who continued the work of building. Together with Giovanni Bianco and the sculptor Leonard Sattler, he created the imposing main door. The building on 3 floors is supported on the ground floor by 4 bound atlases. Tied by the feet and giving an impression of indomitable strength, they represent the carnal, barbaric element of man, who in the foreground is subdued to the divine. This is why we find the 4 virtues, temperance, prudence, justice, and zeal, embodied in the 4 allegorical figures. Above stands the wind instrument tower. Guests arriving at the convent were greeted from these with trumpets and fanfares. In some periods there was a special organ here, but then they went back to the traditional wind instruments. Another work by the sculptor Sattler is the Fountain of the Eagle in the monastery's courtyard. Apparently the eagle, taking off at the last moment, was sprayed with poison from the serpent coiled in defense. A detail to note, the poison is the water of the fountain. The Treppenhaus brings a whiff of the south among the walls of the convent. It is clear, open and pleasant, and decorated with 2 wrought iron grids made by Johann Baptist Probst, who also created the numerous little cherubs. The walls and ceilings are covered with stucco reliefs. "14 little frescoes in the ceiling tell of allegories and mythology. Here we encounter secular and ecclesiastical power. To one side the stairs of the prelates led to the abbot's quarters, and to the other the imperial stairs created to welcome state sovereigns. They led to the imperial chambers, each one of which was adapted to a different theme, and therefore able to ensure for every guest attention which was always reverent and personal. The chambers took the names of the most famous guests. For example, in the papal room hangs a picture portraying Pius VI. This pope saved the monastery from abolition at the time of Joseph II. The audience room, lined with red velvet, is one of the most beautiful rooms. The impressive relief on the ceiling seems to open the room out towards the sky and communicates to the visitor the victory of the House of Austria over the four reigns of the world, from the vision of David. The room dedicated to hunting is characterized by paintings with scenes of hunting deer, boar, bears, and such like animals. Other rooms are the Feistenberger Zimmer, the tapestry room, the Prince Eugene room, where the prince, however, never slept, the bishop's room, and the Bruckner room. Here there are various personal objects exhibited of this great artist. In the year 1715, the abbots of St Florian's convent, always in the vein of building, received an imperial edict forbidding them to carry out costly construction work. All the more reason to hurry to get the still unfinished work completed. These were the years in which Jakob Brandhauer created the marvelous marble hall. Here, as well as in the other rooms, the mystical motifs and Greek divinities in the frescoes on the walls and ceilings are what strike us. The monumental fresco on the ceiling is by Martin and Bartholomew Altomonte. Supported on marble columns gilt with gold, the hall is built by Altomonte in a picturesque way towards the sky. There it opens out and reveals a suspended scenario, dizzy with the victory of Hungary. The representatives of Austria and Hungary do homage on their knees to the god of victory, Jove, who has his foot on a conquered Turk. Imperium sine fine dedi, I have given you an empire without end, is the inscription on the flag, borne by an angel among the clouds. And it is this that the marble hall wishes to express: immense power and infinite wealth. The entire hall, originally conceived for the imperial table, abounds in glory and wealth: gold, stuccoed marble and faceted mirrors. A gem of a hall that is used today as a concert hall and sparkles also in this role. Brandhauer, unfortunately, did not live to see his masterpiece completed, but it was completed according to his plans and desires. With this, rebuilding ended. It had needed 70 years and 5 abbots had been involved, but the impressive monument in honor of St Florian was completed. The convent church, which was rebuilt by Carlo Carlone, was dedicated not only to St Florian but also to St Augustine. But in first place, it does homage to the Ascension of Mary, the Mother of God. This incomparable church has been only recently raised to the status of basilica, an honor that it has really deserved. The high altar in red Salzburg marble is a real glorification of the Madonna. The painting above the altar is of the Ascension of the Virgin. Next to the statues of the church's two secondary saints, St Florian and St Augustine. Above we find the statue of King David. The double meaning here must be stressed. This important building seems to want to depict the Tower of David. At the same time, this is an ancient symbol of Mary. To the right and left of the high altar we see the choir stall made by the ingenious hand of Adam Franz. Here the Augustinian friars say their prayers, sing their hymns and meditate. The central nave of the church is flanked by 4 chapels on each side. 2 of them, one opposite the other, are dedicated to the most important saints of the convent. In the center of the church soars the dome, 36 meters high, dedicated to the glorification of the real patron saint of the church, the Virgin Mary. The dome fresco shows an impressive ascension. The Virgin is being borne up into the sky as a sovereign by 4 angels. Carlone obtained a celestial plastic effect by not decorating it with stuccos as was the custom, but getting Gump and Steidl to paint frescoes on the ceiling. This way, the effect was to make the church look much higher than it really was. Four paintings in the shape of medallions above the nave tell the story of St Florian. This saint, who has always been the patron saint of Upper Austria. It was here, near the convent, that something happened that made him a martyr. In the years in which the region was still a Roman province, Florian was a public official. When the persecution of the Christians increased, he went publicly onto the side of his brothers in belief. To give an example, the Romans chose him for exemplary punishment. They threw him down from the bridge over the river Enns with a millstone around his neck. There is still a cross there today to remind us of what happened. A young woman by the name of Valeria pulled the saint out of the water and placed him on a cart to take him away. After a certain distance, the thirsty oxen stopped to rest, and in that moment, a spring gushed out of the ground in that very place. So Valeria decided that she was doing the right thing, and a short distance further on found a secret Christian graveyard where she buried St Florian. That was where Christian believers built a church. There is a millstone preserved in the crypt of the church today. Presumably it is the one that was used to drown St Florian. An epigraph recounts that it was discovered in 1722, and it is highly likely that it is the same one. Here we also find the tomb of the pious Valeria. An old tombstone and a closed marble sepulchre are testimony. Where the crypt is today below the main altar, there is the tomb of St Florian. His remains were declared relics in the distant past, but in the upheavals of history, however, they have been lost. The remains of the 6,000 believers in Christ that had been buried in the secret graveyard during the Roman age were also transferred to the crypt. Following on this, they were moved to the crypt of the church, where they repose also abbots and many monks, and also lay promoters of St Florian, such as Queen Catherine of Poland and Count Caspar Starhemberg. Following his expressed desire, the composer and organist Anton Bruckner was also buried here. Bruckner, who had lived in such close spiritual union with this monastery. The sarcophagus is situated directly under his beloved main organ. The organ, built between 1770 and 1774 by Franz Xavier Chrisman, and in the following years widened and decorated, at that time had the reputation of being the finest and most melodious that was known in the world. Today the organ has 7,343 pipes and 103 registers functioning, and the listener remains spellbound by its beautiful sound. In 1837, Anton Bruckner, a 13-year-old but already a tall boy, was admitted to the convent school. Very soon his musical talents were attracting the attention of everyone. He became one of the most famous boys of the St Florian's choir. He did not last long. He grew and his voice changed, but during that period of studies he became an excellent organ player. Finishing his studies, he left St Florian's. Soon afterwards, however, he returned to his beloved Chrisman organ. After his death, it was called the Bruckner organ in his honor. The St Florian's Boys' Choir still exists today and can often be heard. They bear witness to the very close union between the Augustinian monks with music and singing. the singing and music that during every Mass are present as divine, celestial messengers, raising the community to the highest spheres of infinite beauty and harmony. This experience is unforgettable, for once you have the impression that you are part of the complete whole, you feel the walls of the church and the convent steeped in knowledge and wisdom. As happened in past times, you become a pilgrim, with a yearning to return again to St Florian's and to stop there in devotion for a while.